Wonderful. So I'm Audrey Rossow. I'm the Senior Director of Clinical Operations at Pulmatrix, which is a small biotech company in Lexington, Massachusetts. We are a pulmonary company, so we study respiratory diseases, which is quite all the rage right now. And I just wanted to say a word about COVID-19. And our regulatory associate made me aware of this support group, so to speak. It's a foundation that supports here in the United States the FDA, and it's a really great source of. It's in layperson's terms, but it also talks about all the companies that are running studies all over the world to combat this pandemic, and also where you can find a clinical trial. So you can see it here, https://reaganudall.org, and then you can just go there and they'll have a link to the COVID-19 hub. So I just also want to have a shout out to all the frontline folks that are working, not just the pharmaceutical companies, the physicians, the people that are still collecting our trash, FedEx, UPS. We're blessed to have them. So my talk is on resourcing for clinical trials in my world, which is we're a very small company. I'm a department of one. So how do we manage to do what we need to do with ICH E6R2, which is ensuring oversight of all the functions and all the duties that the CRO and other vendors provide, as well as anyone that the CROs subcontract to. So why is it important to do, right resourcing, as I call it? Well, the stakes are very high. We all know that in our industry. Everyone's looking for, partners and venture capitalists and funding, and we are a public company, Pulmatrix is, but there's a lot of competition for those dollars now more so than ever. And so it's very important that we run our trials in a compliant and high quality way. Change is a given in our industry. It's just constant. And that's just part of the game if you're in this game. We are highly regulated, which is a good thing, but those guidances and regulations can change over time. And we, meanwhile, still have to provide proper sponsor oversight based on my previous slide. And then one thing I've just added is that the performance of your clinical contract research organization is not known in advance. And what I mean about that is you may have the same CRO, you might even have the same team, but things are going to change. It's going to be a different project, a different program, different molecule. And so really what I'm saying here is it's a very expensive endeavor. It's highly unpredictable. So it's sort of like buying a Lamborghini that works, that works once every 3 weeks, right? Who would do that? It's just, high cost, low predictability. And so when does CRO oversight begin? If I were doing this in front of an audience, I'd ask you to raise your hands, but you can just think about it. Do we start thinking about oversight activities after the first interim monitoring visit and we get that reported? Do we start it when we begin to qualify and select our CRO? Is it when the trial master file is created, or maybe when the first subject's enrolled and then we know we have to really start doing proper oversight? It's when you begin to qualify and select your CRO. And so that's really where it starts. That's where the relationship starts. It's something you kind of can't backfill into the relationship, the partnership. So this is a list of manuals and plans required for study startup. And are all these plans necessary for all studies? No. Can some of them be combined? Yes, such as maybe a project management plan, communication plan, risk management plan. Do they all have to be 50 pages long? Absolutely not. So you have to right size it for your study, whether it's a phase 1A, 1B, phase 2, phase 3, and the complexity, of course, of your protocol and how many vendors you have. But this is a long list. This is a lot of work. And you may be saying, well, that's why I hired my CRO. They're going to do all this. They will do much of it, most of it. They will draft these things, and then we need to review them. If you're fortunate, they come to you in really good shape, but my experience has been that's not always the case. So in my mind, critical roles for clinical CRO oversight is a clinical project manager and a clinical operations lead. Sometimes they're called clinical trial managers, clinical trial leads. Lead CRAs is what they used to be called. So this is what I would want to see in my own department as we grow to do proper oversight. And so for the project manager, that's typically timeline management, budget management, and then CRO and vendor oversight. And then for the real operations, the real tactical piece, that person's responsible for site selection, informed consent, IRB submissions, site budgets and contracts, training the sites and supporting them, and training and oversight of CRAs. Now again, you might look at this and say, well, that's exactly why I hired my CRO. That's what my CRO does. But you have to oversee those activities. The sponsor is ultimately responsible for the quality of the deliverables. So that's just at least my perspective. So why do we have a little bit of blind spot on this? Why am I a department of one and I have 3 programs ongoing? I think part of it is C-suite executives, the lack of knowledge of what we do. They shouldn't know what we do. They shouldn't know how to write an informed, my CEO should not know how to write an informed consent form or, what goes into an IRB or an ethics committee submission. But it's very hard to convey the complexity and the amount of work that this is just study startup I'm talking about. I'm not even yet into enrollment. So they just don't understand typically what all those manuals and plans I showed you, what they are and what they consist of and why they're important. And the second thing is CROs, it's extremely expensive, right? So a C-suite executive is going to say, well, or a VP of finance will say, well, I'm paying the CRO $8 million. Why do I have to, hire you and maybe more of you? And the answer is really because this isn't like they're changing the oil in your car, right? This is a partnership. Your study is your baby, and so they're your babysitter. And so it's just not that simple. It's a partnership, and it has to be a partnership. And again, we have to have proper resourcing to do proper oversight. So what I've done is I found a way to calculate the number of full-time equivalents you need. It's not fancy, it's not expensive, it's Microsoft Excel. And what I do is I outline all the tasks that need to be accomplished. So the manuals and plans I showed you are just an example. There are many things that cascade from that, and I have a lovely Microsoft project Gantt chart that I use for every study. And then I try to apply the number of human hours associated with each task. And again, this is on my side, my department. And then I tackle finite tasks first, and then assess ongoing tasks. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a minute. But these things are, they're very, very variable. And the drivers of some of this calculating what you need is, the phase of the study, a therapeutic area, the number of sites, the number of subjects, the complexity of the protocol, needless to say, how many vendors and number of countries. And there are other things as well. And one could add here cash flow. If I had 3 people in my department, I'd be happy, but it's me right now, and that's okay. So that's that's kind of a financial way to look at it. And there are other drivers as well. So I think of finite tasks have hopefully in the startup, hopefully have a start date and an end date. So the protocol, right? It's draft, it's finalized, it's signed off. Statistical analysis plan, trial master file plan, data management plan, informed consent form, things like that. It's a document, maybe it's a template, or it's a final document, investigator brochure. The list goes on. And then I have ongoing tasks. So they repeat over time. So then I just list each task, how long it takes, how often it occurs, and its duration. So external teleconference calls, sponsor visits to sites, maybe monitoring visit report review. Again, it's a lot of minutia, but it's all very important. So this is a kind of a complex looking slide, but basically for illustration, I took those documents I mentioned before and I put them in an Excel file, and I calculated, how many hours someone on my team, not necessarily me, but someone on my team in my company needs to spend looking at the draft and then cleaning it up and then finalizing it. And this is, again, assuming in a perfect world you have a finalized protocol before you start all this, which doesn't happen in my world. But, investigator site file, you look at the table of contents for that. I mean, 4 hours is generous. Someone could say, I could do that in 15 minutes. And that's why it's a tool. And so I included here as the assumptions, initial draft of these documents, 2 rounds of review and final approval. And then as far as I calculated, I need 412 hours. And for a full-time person, so 40-hour work week, that's 10 weeks. And someone could say, okay, that's great, but I want it done in 6. And so, okay, then you need 1 point whatever people to do that. Ideally, this is ideally. And some of these things can be done concurrently. So if you have a person that's responsible for pharmacokinetics in your company, they can be looking at the bioanalytical lab manual. If you have a data manager, they could be looking at the data management plan, so on and so forth. But as a project manager, I mean, my department is clinical operations, but I've come through the industry mostly doing project management. So I see it as my role in the company to organize and manage all this for my colleagues. And then this is a sample of ongoing tasks. So I have external TCONs, face-to-face meetings, travel for site visits, ct.gov posting. That's a thing here in the United States we need to do, not unlike UDRACT, and then monitor visit report review. I mean, there are many, many more tasks. So how long does it take to do an external teleconference call, agenda in minutes? Now this one, I have to say your CRO is probably doing that, but it really just depends. But this, like internal TCONs, including agenda in minutes and actually slides, that's something I do. And so again, this doesn't take into account protocol amendments, CRO or site staff turnover, or responses to regulatory authorities, which, as you all know, can kind of muck things up a little bit. So again, I just add them up. I say, okay, that's 930 hours with a full-time person. That's 23 weeks. Well, that's great, because I said it's a 6-month. We got 6 months for startup. It's pretty close. But my CEO says, no, I need that done in 3 months. Okay, well, either I'm not going to make 3 months or I'm going to need additional resources. And it doesn't have to be a full-time hire. It can be a consultant. I'm in the Boston area, and so there are just many, many, many consultants, contractors, companies that represent them and that can help you resource for that, or help me resource for that. In fact, I was a consultant for 10 years before I joined Pulmatrix full-time. So in conclusion, clinical trials are unpredictable, they're expensive, they're complex. We need to resource appropriately, but it doesn't always happen correctly, which, as I've said, there are many reasons for that. But what it does, it increases a lot of risk to the trial and to the sponsor, and it kind of gives me headaches, but that's okay. And then just that there are many resourcing configurations and options depending on your size, your development plan, again, your cash flow, the understanding of all these tasks and responsibilities that need to be done. And everybody says quality is important, but it sometimes it's hard to find like where the buck stops there, so to speak. And proper oversight is a way to ensure that you are having a quality program. And again, those manuals and plans are a really excellent way, and that's why they're so important, to document sponsor oversight. So that is my presentation. This is my name, my email address, and my phone number. Would love to talk some more. I'm looking forward to, I'm wanting to start a group, maybe a LinkedIn or more like a Zoom meeting with colleagues like yourselves to share best practices. Again, my perspective is in a very small company with limited resources, and right now I'm working with a very large global CRO, and it's a really bad fit. They were on board before I came on, and I'm just really struggling with that. So anyway, that is my presentation, and